Hello, welcome to Tech Girls. My name is Lindy Cherise. In today's video, I'll be talking about SQL Server. So I do plan to make it so simple that even a 5-year-old will understand this. So these are the topics I'll be covering in this video. The first question is, what is SQL Server? What is data, RDBMS, applications, tools, and user interface? So when we talk of SQL Server, it is actually an RDBMS product, and I'll give you more information when it comes to that. So it was developed by Microsoft in 1989. It was when it was launched. And it is used to develop projects for corporate, for small companies, for schools, for universities. So there's different institutions that actually use SQL Server as a back-end tool and also as a back-end app. But I will give you more information about back-end tools and also back-end apps. So before we can even understand more about SQL Server, we need to know what sort of information will be residing on SQL Server. So that information is called data. So it is very important for you to understand what is data. So data is everywhere. It is a collection of facts. And when you look at this orange, you can see that it is an orange which was cut into 4 pieces and it is sitting on a plate on top of a bed and with white sheets. So those are facts that we can gather from this picture. So data can be qualitative and also quantitative. So the difference between the two is qualitative data, it is non-numeric, whereas quantitative data, it is numeric. So when we go back to this orange, I already shared that it is an orange which was cut into 4 pieces and it's sitting on a plate. But then when we look at quantitative data, we can derive from this that there is 4 pieces of oranges which were cut from 1. So that's numeric part of data. So we use data to answer questions and also to tell a story. So questions like it is a fact and it is a pattern that can be derived from a fact that a student to spend more time on social media and less time on studying. There is a chance that they might get E or an F or even fail. And also you can tell a story or a different story when it comes to data. Let's go back to the main topic of today, which is SQL Server. I talked about applications and you need to understand what are applications. When we talk about application, we talk about the front-end app and also the back-end app. So when it comes to the front-end app, these are the apps that where a user can directly interact with the app. So when you go to an ATM to withdraw money, you are interacting with an app, which you can see. But then the data, you are pulling your own data, but the data resides at the back end part of an app. That's where the data can sit in the data can sit in a SQL Server database. And then when you talk about front end, again, we're talking about registration forms, login form. When you log into your internet banking, when you log into your student site, Google website, Facebook. So those are front app apps, but then the data for Facebook actually sit at the back end. So that's why we have the different applications. So SQL Server, when we say it is a back end tool or back end app, we're actually talking about user cannot directly interact with the app. Data is stored in a database. So data that you enter in a registration form, it doesn't sit in front of the registration form. The data actually is captured somewhere when you click submit. Let's look at the most important definition, which is RDBMS. When we look at RDBMS, we're actually talking about the relational database management system. It actually stands for that. So it is the basis of SQL. So for all modern database systems like Microsoft SQL Server, IBM, Oracle, MySQL, and Microsoft Access. So these databases, they are actually working on a relational model. When we talk about relational database, it is a type of database that stores and provides access to data points that are related to each other. So there is a relationship between tables, and then we will see more about tables as we continue with this course. So when we talk about a database, we're actually talking about an organized collection of data stored and accessed electronically from a computer system Where databases are more complex, they are often developed using formal design and modeling techniques. So we'll get to that higher level stuff. For now, we just want the basic. And then there is a table. This is where there's rows and columns. So your data will sit in a table. So let's look at an example, a live example. So say, for example, you are a family, say your surname. So my surname is Sherry's, and then when you look at Sherry's family, we do have brothers, we have sisters, we have cousins. So such can be information that can be stored in a table, and we do have the primary key, which is the main person who actually created this family, which is my great grandfather. I hope it is a good example for you to understand. So that data can be stored in tables, and those tables contains rows and columns, and there is a primary key, which is the main key, which is basically like a unique key, which means the surname as well. And then keys are primary or foreign keys. So when we talk about keys, I'll go into an in-depth video where I explain primary and foreign keys. And in order to manipulate this data, to select this data, just like in an Excel, you can open an Excel and see your data. You can play around and manipulate. In a database, you actually use queries to manipulate data. You can select from the database, you can drop the table, you can update the table. Say now, maybe last year I wasn't married, but this year I'm married. I need to change from a Miss to a Mrs. Obviously, that type of data will need to be updated. So that table will actually be updated by using an update statement to update that data. So let's look at tools, because remember I talked about tools and also backend apps. So let's look at tools. So we use tools to develop. So when we talk about the front end app, we use programming language like .NET and Java. So your websites, your ATM, as I talked about ATM, those will use your front end, your apps in your phone, those will use your .NET and Java and other programming languages. But then the back end app, that's the part where the data is actually stored. So I'll be covering SQL Server, which is the database engine we'll be using, but there's actually more like IBM DB2. There's also Oracle database. There's also Sybase, ASE, and then also these front-end app, which is Java and .NET. So now let's look at SQL Server. So why SQL Server? Because SQL Server, it is a database engine which actually give you a graphical user interface. So when you talk about graphical user interface and character user interface, graphical is when you don't need to actually write the statement to manipulate data. You can actually go to the database and actually drag and drop, and then that's why we say a graphical user interface. So say for example, when you look at this, when you're looking at this picture, you can see that this is a database, and then you can see that these are the tables, and then in those tables there's columns, there's data with data types, and also you can see if it allows nulls or it doesn't allow nulls. So you can just drag this and then you will see the data at the bottom. But then when you look at the character user interface, a person will need to go and type select from this table. So they actually type queries in order to manipulate this data. So when we talk about SQL Server, we are talking about a database engine which operates on the back end, and it does store values. And let's continue with the next video where I will show you how to do the installation, so you can even see the framework and see how the graphical user interface looks. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you do understand what is SQL Server and your knowledge is actually simplified. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, support our movement in making sure that we bring technology to our communities, and do have yourself a wonderful day.